What the you think is my opinion of it? I think it was put that in, though.
So the Tribe drops its third straight of this trip, 6-1 to the Rangers. For the Indians, 1 run out of the 3-1. That's all we've got. One goddamn hit.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Passball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com. And if you listen to the intro as it's being played, and I'm going to lower it down a little bit, one of the old school Passball Show intros playing right now. A lot of stuff we're going to get into today. We're going to talk a little baseball. A couple interesting things going on that I do want to touch on, but this is really the time of year where we can focus on some spring training baseball and really the outlook that we have in regards to teams as we get set for this season. And once again, you could be part of the show if you want. The number is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. The Kansas City Royals announced the signing today. And it was, I would guess, and I'm trying to put myself in the eyes or the shoes of a Kansas City Royal fan and kind of understand that there probably is a little disappointment. An offseason that was set up, and if you listen to General Manager Dayton Moore from the entire time since free agency started, he emphasized the importance of what it meant to the franchise and what it meant to him in regards to his priorities to bring back and sign free agent first baseman Eric Hosmer. Now, we don't know, and we may never know exactly what the terms of what the Kansas City Royals offer to Eric Hosmer was. And remember, we spoke about this a couple weeks ago about the false reporting that was out there and whether it was mainly the agents that were throwing these numbers out there, but we knew that $140-something million contract offer for Eric Hosmer was supposedly made by the Kansas City Royals. And we find out right now that it was completely and utterly not true. Same thing with J.D. Martinez and the Red Sox. J.D. Martinez is not going to get a 5-year contract offer for $125 million and then say, you know what, can you pay me $15 million less and agree to the $110 million deal? So we knew there's a little bit of issues going on there as far as fabrication, maybe stuff being blown out there by the agents that wasn't really true. So I don't think we're ever going to know exactly what the Kansas City Royals offered Eric Hosmer. And I think that's, important to see, because if they go through this process, not only the process of trying to sign Eric Hosmer, and he ends up going to the San Diego Padres, but watching Logan Morrison, who you thought was probably going to be number 2 on their list, or the second most important first baseman that they were going to look at, maybe the ideal fallback plan if Eric Hosmer signed elsewhere. And the amount of money that Logan Morrison got for the Minnesota Twins looks like it might have very well been out of the Royals' range as well. So we move into the signing of Lucas Duda. And obviously the Lucas Duda signing for the Kansas City Royals hits on a bunch of different levels. And obviously the first one I'm going to throw out there is obviously tongue-in-cheek. The Mets fans that are probably over Lucas Duda now. I thought he was a good player for them for a series of years. He did hit 30 home runs once, hit 30 home runs last year combined between the Mets and the Tampa Bay Rays. So he showed the ability to get on base, hit for a little power. I don't think he embarrassed himself at first base, but was certainly a borderline, somewhere between a below average first baseman and a defensive liability. Now, we remember Lucas Duda, and unfortunately Mets fans are going to remember Game 5 of the World Series, a game that I was at, a game in which the Mets were that close to winning. Now, here's what I got to say. Those that want to blast a Lucas Duda and single-handedly blame him for the loss in Game 5, which I think the Mets lost that entire World Series as a team. Daniel Murphy, who had a great postseason, was not the same in the World Series. The Royals, when the game was on the line, seemed to come up with the big hit every single time. But pretty similar to the way some Met fans will remember Carlos Beltran for the called strike 3 on the Adam Wainwright curveball in Game 7 of the 2006 National League Championship Series. People may remember Lucas Duda for that errant throw with a speeding Eric Hosmer on his way home, which would have been the third out of Game 5. Now let's make this clear. The Mets were not winning that World Series. And I thought they were set up in a beautiful setting with Matt Harvey pitching, one of the best games that he ever pitched there. And if Lucas Duda makes a good throw to the plate and Eric Hosmer is out and the Mets win that game 2-1, I think they're setting themselves up for a loss in Game 6. The Royals win the World Series anyway. Unfortunately, at a game that was supposed to go one way or seemed like it was leaning one way and goes the other way because of a mistake, we're going to remember that mistake. So I understand a lot of, people are saying Lucas Duda joining the Royals, should he get a World Series ring for helping them win the World Series in 2015? Listen, I could say it tongue-in-cheek. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of joking around when I say it, but, a lot of people are pretty down on Lucas Duda. I think he's got the ability, especially playing in the American League, where he gets a chance to DH part of the time. I know Kendrys Morales is still there. He's going to be the full-time DH, but, Morales may play a little first base. Morales may need a day off here and there. So Lucas Duda's got a chance to play in the American League for a full season. And I think this will help him. He's coming off of a season in which he hit 30 home runs. So it's not like he is a average and ordinary offensive player. He's still pretty good. Not great. Not Eric Hosmer. Now, some people tried to throw some comparisons, throwing, the analytics out there and stuff like that. The OPS plus that he had of 116, which is above league average. The fact that he hit 30 home runs in 127 games. OPS of 818. Was higher with the Mets. Didn't do as good of a job with the Tampa Bay Rays. And I think you do got to remember that. Lucas Duda for the season last year hit just 217. Now that includes a 52-game stretch with the Tampa Bay Rays where he hit 175. So he really was exposed, playing a little first base, playing a little DH. But, if you look at the other caliber first basemen that were out there, I would have thought that Logan Morrison would be a little bit of a better fit for the Royals. I mean, I look at Duda and listen, can a guy go out there and hit 20-something home runs? I mean, if you look at 3 of the last 4 years, he's hit 27 or more home runs. He's battled injuries, of course. The 2016 season, he only played in 47 games, but he is a useful major league player. He has a decent eye at the plate. He's not going to be mistaken for Joey Votto, but he did have a good year last year in regards to the 60 walks that he got in the 491 plate appearances. And I put a stat out there that doesn't get talked about too much, and trust me, I'm not trying to bore anybody with stats, but it has to do with the difference between the on-base percentage and the batting average. And if it's 100 or more, in other words, if your on-base percentage is 100 or more points higher than your batting average, that means that you probably have a pretty good eye at the plate. And, you look at Duda, I think he's going to be a useful player for the Kansas City Royals. But going back to some of the points that I made earlier this week, the Royals are on kind of tank mode. And I know they want to develop some young players. I know they are looking at this maybe as an opportunity to get a little younger and maybe focus on the future. But I tell you, they had a run, and I know they won themselves a World Series. And when I talk about tanking teams, the Miami Marlins, who were formerly the Florida Marlins, won 2 World Series, and each time stripped the team down afterwards. But at least they won those 2 World Series. And the Kansas City Royals have a little bit of the same thing that you could say about them. You know, they won the World Series in 2015. They were there in 2014. You know, they were, maybe a hit away from tying Game 7 against Madison Bumgarner against the Giants. So they had a run. I mean, it's a shame to see it end so quickly, though. I mean, you look at the age of, a Hosmer and a Moustakas and, even a Lorenzo Cain, is in his early 30s. It's not like these guys are, in their mid to late 30s and their careers are, winding down the tubes. The Royals, I still believe, had some responsibility to their fans. And the issue that I have is not the fact that they decided to, shut it down, break it down enough and start over, which they might as well say that they're doing right now. But I just believe that if they managed the contracts that they had a little bit better, they wouldn't have been put into this situation. Now, there was a trade that they made last offseason, and they dealt Wade Davis. Could have had something to do with money, but the main reason why they traded Wade Davis was because he was going to become a free agent after the 2017 season as well. And the Royals, listen, I call that bad luck. You bring up a series of players at the same time. You want to get the most out of them, and they all happen to become free agents the same offseason. That is bad luck. But it's not like it was sprung on the Royals at the last moment. They had opportunities to do some things. Now, we could debate whether or not extensions were possibilities. I'm sure Mike Moustakas wished he signed an extension. If he was under contract for the Royals for the next 2 years, it might very well be better than anything he may get in free agency right now. But you can't fault him for it because, nobody has the crystal ball. Nobody's able to look in, to the future and see exactly what was going to happen with free agency this year. Now, if I was the Royals, for sentimental value, I'd look at bringing Moustakas back. Now, I know, they have some younger players. Chester Colbert is a decent third baseman. Raul Mondesi Jr. is going to look for a place to play, either at second or third. I know they like Ryan Goings, who they got from the Toronto Blue Jays. But bringing back Moustakas, and even maybe play him at the corners. Play him a little first base against some lefties. When you sit Lucas Duda. Allow some of your other players to get some playing time. But at least you keep a little of the aura of what you saw, a couple of years ago. And I hate to say it, it seems like the Royals winning the World Series in 2015 seems like it was a lot longer ago than it really was. And, these players, whether it's a Hosmer, a Moustakas, a Cain, they seem like they're a little bit older than they really are. Now, I suggested the other day we were talking about the possibility of, the free agents signing, or the 6 main free agents, Arrieta, Lynn, Cobb, Holland, Moustakas, and Carlos Gonzalez. And I do predict, I believe all 6 of them will sign a major league deal with a team before opening day. Now, there's still a month to go. And you look at the series of teams, I think there's going to be some injuries, unfortunately. Nobody ever likes to hear about an injury involving a player, especially an impact player. Brent Honeywell, the star young pitcher for the Tampa Bay Rays, having Tommy John surgery. He was a guy that the Rays were probably looking forward to taking a look at the major league level this year. I mean, geez, there's nobody else there. They basically traded or let their entire team go. Talking about tanking. But I think the Royals really should at least keep an open eye to the possibility of bringing Mike Moustakas back. Because this may have been the one out of their series of free agents that seemed to come back to them. And the market came back to them. And think about it. Moustakas is not costing them a draft pick. You could retain him for a year or 2. Tell him if he dares, he could test free agency again. Yeah, I don't see why the Royals all of a sudden are holding on to their money as if it's, gold, and as if the price of the money that they have is only going to go up over the next series of years. It's not an annuity. I mean, I think baseball teams now, you're looking at about the 4 or 5 or 6 teams that aren't even trying this year. They owe something to their fans. And the Kansas City Royals, with all due respect to Lucas Duda, and I like Lucas Duda, I thought he was an underrated player with the Mets. I thought he certainly proved to be the better of the two between him and Ike Davis, which I didn't think initially. But he's a guy that gets on base. He's a guy that has home run power. And you know what? He's a stand-up guy. He's very quiet. And you know what? There's something to admire about somebody that just kind of, sticks to himself. What's the expression? Stay quiet and carry a big stick. That describes Lucas Duda. But I don't see the cutting board coming out for the press conference over the next couple days with the Royals, bringing 100 reporters in talking about their big, huge signing of Lucas Duda. And I hope for Lucas's sake, he has a good year, maybe has the opportunity to play for a contender at the trading deadline this year, just like he did last year. But it's a shame what the Royals are choosing to do. I mean, they're sitting here with players that are, on pretty big contracts still. Players that you wouldn't expect to be on a team that is absolutely tanking. A team that, yes, they finished a couple games under 500 with Hosmer, with Moustakas. And by the way, Hosmer and Moustakas probably had their best seasons, each. But Alex Gordon hit 208 last year. A guy that they just signed to a big free agent contract. Lorenzo Cain had a pretty good year. You look at some of the guys that are there, and yes, there are some good young players, some good veteran players. And this is a team that, man, if you just wish, and this is speaking from the aspect of the Kansas City Royals and their organization and their fans, if they just added a couple small pieces, it probably didn't even have to be Hosmer on a $140 million deal. Like I said, I look at Moustakas still being there as a free agent. He would make that team better. You got Ian Kennedy, who's coming off of a terrible season, but Danny Duffy kind of emerging as the ace of that staff. Kelvin Herrera, who's going to be a free agent at the end of this season. There's your closer. It's a team that, honestly, was probably, I don't know, about maybe 2-3 decent pieces away from being in the mix in the AL Central. And listen, anything's possible. I mean, maybe they win a couple series early, they could build some momentum and, kind of play the whole Philadelphia Phillies card. Or the, San Diego Padres card. Or the Seattle Mariners card, or Chicago White Sox card, whatever it is. The team that's not expected to do very well, but gets off to a good start and starts believing in itself, and maybe overachieves towards the expectations that are out there. But I don't believe much in this Kansas City Royals team. And I look at a guy like Lucas Duda, and all jokes aside, like I said, we could throw the one joke in there and say, hey, he's joined the Kansas City Royals. Maybe he'll get a World Series ring with them for what he did to help them in 2015. But listen, we've talked about a history of baseball where so many players were defined by one play. And Lucas Duda's play in that World Series in Game 5 is nowhere near on the level of some of the bigger moments in the history of the game. Ralph Branca giving up Bobby Thompson's home run in 1951. The Giants win the pennant. Bill Mazeroski's home run off of Ralph Terry in the 1960 World Series. Dave Henderson's home run off of Donnie Moore in the 1986 American League Championship Series. There's been many moments like that have defined players. And I made a similar comparison to Carlos Beltran. taking a called third strike on that beautifully thrown curveball by Adam Wainwright in the National League Championship Series of 2006. And listen, I think New York fans or Mets fans won't forget that errant throw. But I would bet that there is a much smaller percentage of Mets fans out there that are defining Lucas Duda from that throw. And I think the main reason is everything else that went wrong in that World Series. The fact that, they had a lead in Game 1. Jeurys Familia gives up the home run to Alex Gordon. They lose that game in extra innings. The several leads that they had going into the latter part of the games. And the Royals continuing to come back. I know Mets fans are upset that they didn't win that World Series. If you get there, you might as well win it. But I look at it very clearly. And I hope most baseball fans agree with me. The better team won that series. The Royals were clicking on all cylinders. They were the more determined team. And I don't know if the performance in the World Series the year before, when it came that close and just lost to the Giants, gave them that little extra motivation to be clicking on all cylinders. But the Mets made a couple mistakes, sure. But I can't say that they played a terrible World Series. Yes, when it goes down in history, they lost 4-1. But how many teams lose a World Series 4-1 when they have a lead late in the game in just about every single game? It was a couple breaks away from things going a little better for them. But in the end, the better team won. And I look at the Royals, and I just think it's a shame, because I think there is more that this team has to offer. And they have succumbed. They've succumbed to the unfortunate thing that I've been talking about for the past couple weeks. And that's the decision that's made, whether it comes from ownership, whether it comes from the front office, the decision to just not care. And it's an apathetic view on a game that you don't have to be great. You don't have to have the best players in the world. You don't have to have an overwhelmingly great roster to have a chance. But you do at some point have to spend a little money. And the Royals, where they sit with their payroll right now, essentially passing up the opportunity to bring back an Eric Hosmer, to not be in the running. And apparently what we hear is the offer was closer to around 5 years and $100 million. He ends up getting an 8-year deal for, $139 with the San Diego Padres. And not only that, but that was a very good deal that the Padres put together for him. I know people are going to always be weary of that long-term contract. And I get it. Anytime somebody signs a deal for 8 years, you're like, wow, are we going to get the same player in 8 years that we're getting right now when we signed him? First of all, the guy's 28. Second of all, the contract is completely front-loaded. The first 5 years, he's making $20 million a season. And you know what? Year 6, he probably will be closer to a $13 million player. And the fact that those last 3 years of the contract are going to pay him $13 million a season is good for the Padres. So we look at this, and I understand. Every time somebody signs a big contract, listen, they're your hero. Until they sign that first big contract. Giancarlo Stanton, you love him. Signs a 13-year contract, now he's overpaid. Mike Trout, at some point will hit free agency. He's obviously underpaid right now. Anything less than $40 million a year for Mike Trout would be underpaid. But he signs his next big deal, whether it's with the Angels or the Phillies or somebody else. Whatever they pay him, all of a sudden, you're going to be talking about how Mike Trout is overpaid. But in regards to the contracts, the way they're set up in baseball, I thought, number one, Eric Hosmer got a good deal for himself. He got some security. He's going to be paid. But also the San Diego Padres did well with this because they didn't commit themselves to, $20 to $30 million a year for a player that's entering his mid-30s. But I look at the Royals and I'm wondering, could they have done something similar to that? And if so, why wouldn't you be more involved? Basically, what you're telling your fans is that, Eric Hosmer wasn't worth anything more than 5 years and $100 million to you. But what is worth it for our fans and our franchise is Lucas Duda on a 1-year deal for $3.5 million. And once again, I always feel like I'm talking through people that may look at baseball salaries and may never understand that it's just the dollar value that exists for the market that's there. The same thing if we were talking about, Hollywood actors that are getting $20, $30 million a movie. It's a lot of money, yes. But for some top actors and actresses, it may not be enough for certain parts. But we're talking about, the $20 million player in Hosmer passing up, potentially the $7 to $9 million player in Logan Morrison and settling for a player that's going to take $3.5 million. Now, Lucas Duda probably could have gotten a better contract himself, but he's coming off of a season where he watched his batting average slip all the way down to 217. Yes, he had 30 home runs, but he also missed a little time on the disabled list. He's probably at this point worth about the contract that he's given. But what the Kansas City Royals are doing is they're selling their fan base that their starting first baseman and maybe their cleanup batter is only worth $3.5 million. What does that say to the fans' memories of Eric Hosmer? And obviously Eric Hosmer handled things the right way. He said a nice open letter or whatever. Took out a page ad in the newspaper thanking the fans, thanking the Royals. But what does that say to the fans? That one of the best stars that you've had, and certainly the biggest star that you've had since the days of George Brett, is not worth it to bring back on a long-term deal as he's entering the prime of his career. He's not 38. He's 28. Likely his best years are ahead of him. And you could add, like I said, the Royals to the list of the teams that are tanking this year. And NBA Commissioner David Stern came out with a statement today talking, kind of warning owners and teams about tanking in the NBA, losing games on purpose to get themselves closer to a number one pick. As we hit the halfway point here on the Pass Ball Show. Once again, John Pielli with you. The number, if you want to be involved in the program, 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. A reminder, if you want, you could send out a comment on Periscope or Facebook Live. And, if you're willing to contribute to the show, I'm willing to talk with you. But, like I started to say, Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, ends up kind of coming down hard on owners, making sure everybody understands that there will be stiff penalties for any team that is interested in tanking or compromising the integrity of the game by not trying to win or not trying to play hard. And the same really should apply for baseball. Baseball seems to be the only sport where you're allowed to lose games on purpose. And I understand we're not going to ever get to the situation where we're talking about players that are on the field that are actually not trying. Because I believe in every single one of these players. Everybody that's playing for the Tampa Bay Rays, everybody that's playing for the Miami Marlins, everybody that's playing for the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Kansas City Royals. I believe that they're going to do their very best. The question isn't about them, though. The question is about the organizations that they represent, whether they're trying to compete or are they looking to stockpile, the earliest possible draft pick in the next draft. Because as we're comparing it to the NBA, it's something that comes down from the commissioner and is absolutely frowned upon. Mark Cuban just got, fined $600,000 for making a reference that it might be the best for the Dallas Mavericks if they just lost all the rest of their games and got themselves a lottery pick. Now, they didn't have any evidence that the Mavericks were tanking games or losing on purpose, but it's just some strong statements made by a strong-minded owner. How does what Mark Cuban has said in public compare to that of the decisions of particularly the Miami Marlins and the Tampa Bay Rays? You're looking at two teams that between the two of them probably could not put together a quality lineup that could compete with half the teams in all of Major League Baseball. The Mar Rays are basically looking to get themselves, removed or contracted. And I said all along, I feel terrible for the good players or the players that have been part of the team for the last couple of years and happen to still be around. With the Marlins, it's the Justin Boers and the JT Realmutos. The veteran players like a Brad Ziegler, a Dan Straley. Guys that were acquired to help them get over the top. And now they're stuck playing for a lousy team. Now they got to keep their heads up. They got to be positive. They're not going to talk about how bad the team that they're playing for is. But I'll tell you, when we get into April and May and the early part of June, and these teams are stinking up the bottom of their divisions, nobody's going to be surprised. And it's a shame because it's not an indictment on the individual players on that team. I heard Keith Hernandez say that, when a season goes astray, and in some cases it's not a season that you intended to go as badly as it did, but some seasons have very low expectations and they go down from there. And he's not the only one that said this. You get to a certain point in the season, you're a good player on a bad team, especially if a trade isn't a possibility. You start playing for the name on the back of the jersey and not the name on the front of the jersey. And that's when you start to figure out what players are about. But my question that I ask, if you're a part of a team, if you're one of the good to decent to very good players that are on a lousy team, and one of the only ones that's left there when you've watched all the talent around you either get traded, be let go as a free agent, or outright released, is a player really doing that bad when a season's gone astray and they start playing for their own personal numbers and their own personal achievement? I honestly don't think that's such a bad thing. It seems like it's a lot worse. It seems like it's an indictment on the player. But what do you have to compare that to? Sometimes when you have good players on a bad team, sometimes when you've set the message that you could absolutely care less about winning this year, you'd be doing the player a favor if you moved them to a place where they had a chance to win. And you're going to still keep them around and frown upon the fact that they care about their own numbers? I mean, geez, in some cases, these players are playing for the opportunity that they're looking to have to play somewhere else next year. Or when they get to free agency, playing for their next contract. And I think there's a little bit of a divide in there because you're saying it's okay for the front office and the ownership to make the decision that, the team is not going to be a winner. So they're going to take every little thing that exists there that could make them a winner and get rid of it and replace it with inferior product. But if you happen to have some holdovers, some players that you either couldn't trade or for whatever reason decided that you didn't want to trade, you're going to hold it against them when they start playing for the name on the back of the uniform. I'm wondering exactly what's going to happen, or exactly when we're going to get to a point where this issue about tanking in baseball is going to be addressed. Because it has started relatively recently, within the last couple of years, and is starting to spiral out of control. You know, we saw the Astros do it and win. And we've seen other teams make that decision and go that route too. We've seen the Tampa Bay Rays do it a number of times already. You know, the Oakland Athletics. You know, I still remember the day that they traded Josh Donaldson. A guy who was barely arbitration eligible, having his first legitimate star season. And what did that do for the Athletics? Because I'm still waiting for the positivity of that trade. You know, Donaldson's out there winning MVP awards, popping 30 home runs a season, hanging out there with the likes of Manny Machado in regards to being, you know, the best third baseman in the American League. And the Athletics, they couldn't wait to get rid of him. You know, I know Kendall Graveman's okay. Franklin Barreto was the top player that they got as far as a prospect in that deal. Made his major league debut last year. He's still relatively young. He's just 22 years old. Actually just turned 22 yesterday. Happy birthday. But, you know, what can you expect? You know, when you're so eager to move pretty good players. You know, the Oakland Athletics have kind of gotten a pass this offseason because they showed some excitement last year. You know, Matt Olson hitting all those home runs in a short amount of time. You know, Franklin Barreto making his major league debut. There's some positivity in Oakland. Probably not enough to get them out of last place, though. And I said before, I mean, there's still too many free agents that are out there in Major League Baseball to set yourself up to a point where you can say, hey, I know this is how the season's going to go. But once again, John Pielli with you. The number, if you want to be involved, 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. The Red Sox look like they got a petition together, and they are interested in changing the name of Yawkey Way back to Jersey Street. And the street, which is obviously located right alongside Fenway Park, was changed to honor longtime owner Tom Yawkey. And obviously there is a lot of issues with the city of Boston and a portion of its fan base. I know a lot of people that are Boston Red Sox fans, and the people that I know that are Red Sox fans don't fit the mold of what some of the fans are criticized for in regards to racism and treatment of opposing players that come into Fenway Park. But you got to remember, Tom Yawkey does have a history of racism. He's known for having a tryout involving Jackie Robinson in 1945, and the decision made to pass on him. You know, we're pretty sure that it was racially motivated. The fact that the Red Sox waited until every single other Major League Baseball team had a black player before, you know, Pumpsie Green became their first black player. Now, Yawkey, in regards to what he did as an executive, as an owner, you know, to stick around there for 44 years, 1933 till his death on July 9th, 1976. We can't hide the fact that he is pretty likely a racist. I mean, you look at some of the young black players that they had in their farm system in the 1950s and the decisions they kept having. It seemed like they weren't ready to integrate their own team. And it's not like the Red Sox were doing well. I mean, these other teams were integrating themselves and were passing the Red Sox up. The Red Sox between 1950 and 1966 didn't have a year where they finished closer than 10 games out of first place. And I think part of it had to do with their, decision or lack thereof decision to integrate their baseball team. Now, should the Red Sox have not honored Tom Yawkey? No. That's where I disagree with you. If you say, hey, because the guy's a racist, you should just forget about his existence. He owned the Boston Red Sox. He is a staple of that franchise for many years. And even though he happened to be a racist, he should still be honored in regards to, one of the figureheads of the Boston Red Sox throughout their history. But we've watched over the last couple of years things kind of coming to a head. The situation with Adam Jones last year was absolutely disgusting. The treatment that some fans, and I don't want to say the majority, I don't want to label all Boston Red Sox fans the same way, but you've asked several African-American players, and they still notice a little bit of difference playing in Boston as an opponent as opposed to playing anywhere else. You could be hated anywhere else for being a ball player on the other team. It seemed like a certain group of Red Sox fans make a bigger deal about somebody's skin being a little darker. And that's, in 2018, that's unacceptable. So I think the Red Sox are doing the right thing here. And, I don't think they should forget that Tom Yawkey ever existed. Anybody that owns a franchise for 44 years, deserves to get some sort of acknowledgement for it. But the Red Sox who want to get themselves past, this little issue that we're having, and hopefully there are no other incidents like this. Because, you don't see this stuff happening in other areas of the country. You don't see racial epithets being thrown at players. Even in the areas of the South. Still exists in Boston. Now, Tom Yawkey's in baseball's Hall of Fame. So is Kennesaw Mountain Landis. And I told you, I am very disappointed in Kennesaw Mountain Landis' ignorance. Especially during the time when the Negro Leagues were thriving. The mid to late 30s, the early part of the 40s. You were seeing star player after star player come out of that league. And if he really thought in his heart of hearts that player, because the color of his skin, wasn't worthy of playing with the white players in Major League Baseball, then I have a harder time acknowledging him for baseball's Hall of Fame than I am Tom Yawkey. Once again, John Pielli with you. Please feel free, comment on either the Periscope feed or the Facebook Live feed. The number I'll throw out one more time if you're interested. 732-364-35 98. We talked a little today. Lucas Duda is going to be remembered by a handful of Met fans, or a good amount of Met fans, for his wild throw in Game 5 of the World Series, where a good throw would have gotten out Eric Hosmer and led the Mets to a victory, moved that series to 3-2, and sent the series back to Kansas City. So is there any irony in there? And irony can hit on a couple different fronts. Duda, as the starting first baseman for the Kansas City Royals, is replacing Hosmer, who he failed to throw out on a routine throw to the plate. Duda goes to the Kansas City Royals, a team that has a handful of players, obviously dropping left and right because of the team's inability to retain its own players. But a certain amount of players on that team have themselves a World Series ring for 2015. Lucas Duda joins a team that perhaps he helped win the World Series. Of course, spent a little time talking about Tom Yawkey, the owner of the Boston Red Sox, a known racist. There's a street that runs, right alongside Fenway Park that's called Yawkey Way, and the Red Sox are leading a petition to change the street and change the name back to what it was called before Tom Yawkey's death in 1976. It was known as Jersey Street. I think it's good. Honestly, if we were talking about any other city, I would say it was less of a big deal. But the fact that it is Boston, and Boston has been in the spotlight with at least a handful of racist fans that exist that go out there and that show up at the ballpark at Fenway. I think this is something that does make sense. Tom Yawkey, listen, there was reasons that there wasn't a black player that was signed by the Boston Red Sox and played in the major leagues until 1959. By that time, every single other team in Major League Baseball had brought in at least one black player. In addition to, obvious, accusations of racism, he certainly wasn't an innovative thinker. Now, you didn't see that, having, a diversity amongst your players gives yourself a better chance to win? Finishing up the show today, I do want to remind everybody tomorrow we're going to be joined by Jerry Eisenberg, longtime writer, and is one of two sports writers that have covered every single Super Bowl. And I tell you, that by itself is just ridiculously fascinating, that there's only two sports writers that are around that could say that they watched and covered every single Super Bowl. We never thought we'd hit a time where MLB free agency would coincide with NFL free agency. Well, we're kind of getting to that point. Handful of teams, including the Jets and the Bears, announcing that they're going to cut ties with certain players. Free agency is getting, eventually getting ready to get started. You got the Arizona situation